in this lesson, we'll talk a little bit more about using the BPR render. So here in ZBrush, there are a number of reasons that you would want to create your models. Some would be to take them out into another application or part of a production pipeline where you're creating a character that you need to output normal maps or displacement maps for, and that is all going to be taken out to another application. Other times you're going to be creating illustrations or concepts that you need to create a nice final render for. So ZBrush actually has incorporated a lot of cool rendering capabilities here, and so we'll take a look at just really quickly working with the renderer. So we kind of talked about just hitting the BPR render. I've also lightened up the background as well. You can go into your document and just change the color by clicking and dragging from this swatch to whatever background color you want. Just lighten it up so we can see things a little bit better and kind of move our camera around and frame things up. You can also, under draw, you can change your angle of view if you want to as well. So from here we can just hit BPR and it'll go through and create a nice render for us. We can press escape if we want to get out of that, but it gives us a nice indication of how long it's going to take. So now it kind of adds some nice shadows, and we've got a little bit nicer fiber mesh going on. And again, when we start to move around, that BPR goes away. So to change our render settings, we can go under render here, and I'm going to just drag this over to the tray on the right. And let's go into render properties. So we turned on draw micro mesh so that we can see our micro mesh. We don't need to have that on anymore. Here are some buttons that will allow us to figure out what we actually want to render. So we're rendering shadows. If you have wax preview on any of your materials, for instance, if we had this on this material, which is our skin, if we went into our wax modifier and turned that up, this will allow us to render that wax preview out. If you have a material that's using fibers, this isn't pertaining to fiber mesh, but a fiber-based material, you could do that as well. You could render out depth Q. So if you wanted to, if you're going to bring this render into another application to drive the depth, maybe you want to blur it based on the depth, you could render out a depth Q as well. And then you have some global settings for the ambient or the diffuse. We'll go ahead and leave those alone. Right under our render properties, you open this BPR render passes. This will allow you to actually access some of the passes that you're creating as you do your BPR renders. So it actually will render out a nice mask for you. You can see our shadows. So it's really nice if you have to go in and start to combine some of these different layers together in something like Photoshop and really tweak the result that you're getting. Okay, so if we were to come in now and let's turn on ambient occlusion, let's say, and go ahead and BPR that, it's going to take a little bit longer to calculate. As you can see, that bar is moving a little bit more slowly, but it'll go through that process and we'll end up with the final image. And then when we look in our render passes, we'll be able to see those passes there. So now at this point we have an ambient occlusion pass, which we've now created. Okay, and we're going to talk more about lighting and kind of out environments in the next lesson. But let's talk about BPR filters, which is kind of cool. So you can actually go in here once you've rendered this, go into our BPR filters, and we can apply a number of filters based on different aspects of our model. So the closed circle means that there's not one applied. If we want to activate one of these, we can just go ahead and hit this little open circle. And here you can see I've just added a filter, and there's a ton of different filters in here. Let's just blur it. Okay, we've increased the blur amount. Masking will allow you to constrain whatever it is that you're doing to just the model or bleed it into the canvas. So if we turn the mask up to 1, you can see it cuts that effect off at the canvas. Or if we turn it back here, it's going to do the reverse. So it's only going to apply it to the canvas, which is just gray in our case, so it doesn't really matter. Now we're driving this blur by the depth. Okay, so if I turn off the depth, you can see the blur is being applied to the whole thing. But if I increase that depth, it's actually beginning to blur it based on the depth. And we can define kind of the area that we want to be here in focus. We can come in here and drag from this particular depth and then from this one. And we can start to decide which parts of our model will actually be in focus. Okay, and it's smart enough to know what the depth is on those in those areas where you actually pick. Okay, and so you can get kind of a nice depth look. You can take down the blur amount. You can also take down the radius. And this is all applied after the render. So if I want to turn this off, I can just hit the little button. It goes away. Maybe I want to darken up the areas that are occluded. So I can go in here, open this one up, and we'll add a new filter. This one will be intensity. Let's take the intensity down so we're actually darkening the image. We'll turn up the mask so we're only affecting the model. And we also only want to affect it based on the ambient occlusion. So we'll go ahead and dial up this ambient occlusion. And then you can see we're just kind of darkening those darker areas. Okay. We can also do the same thing if we want to based on the cavity. So take our intensity, take it down, turn the mask up, and then you can see there's some settings for our cavity. And we can come in and start to darken up some of those areas in the cavities. Okay, and we can do the opposite. Maybe we want to now brighten up some areas. So we'll go ahead and use the intensity this time to brighten up those areas. And this time we'll go ahead and again mask that off. And we'll use ambient occlusion here to kind of brighten up the areas that aren't occluded. We'll take the intensity down a little bit. So you can see I can kind of brighten some of those areas. So you can get a lot of effect here, different effects here from your BPR filters to really tweak the final render the way that you want it to look. And you can also actually adjust the entire render. So we can come down to adjustments and say, okay, I want to actually adjust this. So I can maybe increase the contrast a little bit. To get up here, you can start to see it. When you get up here, you can increase the contrast based on the color. We could also take the brightness of the image up or down, change the gamma, the green or red brightness. Okay, make it a little bit more red in there. So there's a lot of adjustments that we can do here to our render. If we want to clear that out, you just hit clear and turn that off. Okay. See, we've got a little kind of line on there, so I'm going to go into the F3 intensity and let's decrease that a little bit. Okay, and maybe add one more where we take the intensity, take it down a little bit, and drive that based on the shadows. So just kind of darken up the shadows a little bit. All right, so there's a lot of different options in here for tweaking our rendering. There's a ton of material in rendering here in ZBrush, a lot of options that you can tweak. We have training on that if you want to go into more depth in actual rendering of your images. But this is a great way to present your models, get them in, in a nice pose, and create a nice render. And you can do actually a lot of stuff to the render in here in ZBrush rather than taking it out to something like Photoshop, which you may still want to do, and you have the ability to do that with your render passes. You can have all that stuff separated out. Okay, if you actually want to export one of these passes, all you have to do is click on one of these. So click on the depth, and then it'll give you the option to save that out. You can save it wherever you want to. All right, so that's really easy to save those maps out. So next, let's take a look, now that we've got some of the rendering settings looked at, let's take a look at actually lighting and talk just a little bit about lighting, light caps, and environments and things like that. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that next.